Welcome, Built Right listeners. Today, I'm joined by Ikonne, AVP of Product and Engineering at Cox Automotive. And he's also an accomplished author of the book, Becoming a Leader in Product Development. He's got 20 years of experience in product development and is passionate about fostering joy at work, even as a YouTube channel by the same name. But welcome, Eb, to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and a local Atlanta guy over at Cox, where Hatchworks is located as well. But today we're going to deep dive into what you coined the 6 adaptive leader behaviors from your book, Becoming a Leader in Product Development. So we're going to go through some of those and checking out the book. A big thing you kind of hit on, it's becoming increasingly challenging for product development leaders to effectively lead as workplace demands continue to increase. Rate of change, as we all know, is getting crazy, whether it's technology, society, business. There's a lot of pressure on leaders to ensure their groups are moving in a direction towards a common goal. And this is what some of this stuff's going to start to hit on. Like, how do you become an effective leader? But to kick us off, let's go into the first adaptive leader behavior and kind of give us an overview there.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I should set some context for this as well as we go to the behaviors that we expect leaders who create a situation where adaptation happens often to put in place. And I should give some credit to there are several individuals whose research I worked on or read on to really come up with this. But one of them was Ron Heifetz, who has written a number of books on adaptive leadership, and his thoughts and perspectives were quite insightful. And to a large degree, these behaviors are lifted from his work, but applied specifically in a product development sort of context. And like you rightly said, the challenge today is we have a lot of situations that face us, and we go about trying to solve them sort of the wrong way. And sort of the basis for a lot of this adaptive approach is to really recognize that in the workplace, we all have a bunch of challenges. Some challenges are really straightforward, but some challenges are not straightforward. They might be wicked problems. They might be paradoxes. They might be situations where we have to balance tensions, right? We want to deliver quickly, but we want to deliver high quality, right? And these kinds of challenges or problems just require a different approach. But it so happens that for the most part, and I kind of blame, if you will, our academic and institutions for this, we are raised as problem solvers. And so we generally approach every challenge thinking like there is a specific solution, an answer to this question, and everything becomes a math problem. But there are just challenges that don't lend themselves to that kind of situation. So it's really first identifying that not every situation is a math problem that can be solved. There are problems that we need to dance with. And those problems that we need to dance with, are referred to as adaptive challenges. There are other names for them, but in this context, they're referred to adaptive challenges. And then as leaders, our teams need to dance with these problems as we do. And so these are sort of behaviors you as a leader can adopt and encourage that can help your team dance, if you will, with the challenges that confront them. So I hope that's good context before we get into the behaviors. I don't know if anything you want to look at there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect context. I love you coined it like dancing with the problems. There's some rhythm to it, right? And I think I love how you said too, there's never like one right answer. Like the core, like I'm a strategy nerd. And that's one thing with strategy is there's no perfect strategy. There's no one right strategy. There's multiple strategies you can take. And it's really all about increasing your odds of success with an effective strategy. That makes a lot of sense.
All right. So let's jump into the 6 behaviors that we're looking at here. So the first one is referred to as like getting on the balcony. And that's really just attaining some distance. If you've ever been to a program or a show and you're kind of in the middle of things, you might notice that you don't have a great perspective on what's going on, right? You don't necessarily see the forest for the trees. And so getting on the balcony is really creating the space to almost step back and reflect on what's going on and happening around you, and really not always making decisions in the heat of the battle, if I can use that metaphor, but just attaining some distance and trying to gain some perspective. And I would add that I think it's also important for leaders to not, get on the balcony by themselves all the time. Like, find people that you trust, people that bring maybe a different perspective, and have them join you on the balcony, the metaphorical balcony, so that they can kind of give you a perspective of what they're seeing and what they're observing. As we all know, we all have our biases. We all have things that stand out to us that might not stand out to somebody else, just because of our experiences, our history in life. So the more we can get diverse perspectives on what's going on, the better that we have, or the better opportunities we have for really identifying what's in front of us and what we need to go and address.
Yeah. So Ed, let me ask you this. So you are at Cox Automotive. And for those that are not familiar with Cox, there's Cox Automotive, Cox Communications, like there's so many different brands and things within that. So is there when you're in a large company like that, is there like a balcony, using the metaphor, within kind of your specific group? And then there's another balcony that's an even higher level, kind of strategic one, because all the different groups within Cox, I'm sure, kind of play together, and there's things that you have to consider throughout that.
Yeah. So everyone as a leader is responsible for a scope, and you need to get on the balcony, that overlays the scope you're responsible for. So my scope is not the scope of Cox Enterprises. So I'm not supposed to get on the balcony and reflect on scope, on Cox Enterprises as a whole. But I have a scope within the product development group within Cox Automotive. And my job is to, on occasion with people, take a step back and reflect on what's going on. So leaders at every level in the org, for whatever scope they're assigned to, have to get on the balcony and identify the challenges that are, they have to address and lead through for their immediate context. And everybody's supposed to be doing this at every level within the org, for sure.
Yeah, and it's great context. Is the forest through the trees, which is so difficult. I've struggled with that in the past too, trying to get out of the tactical day to day and get to the, why am I doing this? Right.
Yeah. And I think that I was just going to say, and I think that that's why it's important that we get multiple perspectives. Sometimes we think as leaders that I got to do it alone. I got to figure it out by myself. I need to see the entirety of the forest for the trees when it comes to something regarding my org. And this is where I think the idea of distributed leadership is really important. And this view of leadership is not what a single individual does. Leadership is actually produced through the interactions of a people on a team. And yes, I might be the designated leader and have certain expectations that are expectations that people have of me, for sure. But when it comes to leadership as a whole, everyone needs to participate in leadership. And again, getting on the balcony, we should have more people really together. Let's talk about what we're seeing. Let's talk about what we're perceiving as a group. And then that helps us understand how we should go forward. This is, offsites and things like that. You can kind of think about those things as like tangible examples of when people are trying to get on the balcony, right? One of the challenges sometimes with things like offsites is that people get distracted with pressing emails in the moment. And so they don't give themselves the time to be on the balcony to do that reflection. But when you change your space, when you step out of your normal routine, that's, when you get off the dance floor is kind of a way to think about it. When you're no longer dancing and you get on the balcony to watch what's going on, that's what it's like.
Yeah, I wish answering email was as fun as dancing, but no, that's great. I love that as a starting point there. So let's jump to number 2.
Yeah, identify adaptive challenges, and I talked a little bit about that in the intro. And it's really making the distinction between what is a challenge that has a straightforward, easy answer. Maybe there's a well-known established pattern and recipe for that challenge, and really all you need to do is adopt it, or maybe go hire an expert who can show you and teach you how to do those things versus a set of challenges that are really either paradoxes or tensions within the org, or require like just wholesale paradigm shifts in the way you do things. Maybe you had a sales strategy that was one way, but now you want to adopt a new sales strategy, and that's a big change for everybody in the org. And adaptive challenges are tricky sometimes because they often require that we make changes to the way we think about the world, to the way we kind of act in the world. There isn't necessarily expertise that we can just go by and apply and just have it work for us. We really need to come up with our own solutions in that situation. And leaders in that context need to help people understand, like, there are no easy answers here. There are no easy answers here. We all love easy answers. We're all dying for easy answers, but there are no easy answers in this situation. We're going to have to kind of dance our ways and maybe not solve the problem, but be in a continual like engagement with that problem and manage it better.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of shifting your mental model, and our own human nature and human behavior like acts against that so many times. But you hit on the topic of paradoxes. I love a good paradox. Is there any like a paradox out there that you're like, oh, that's one that I find the most compelling or interesting that you've encountered?
Wow. I mean, we deal with paradoxes, every day. Like an obvious one, if you're in product development, is finding that balance between building the right thing, if you will, like in the right way. And we want to get something out as soon as possible, but we also want it to, stand up to scrutiny and be solid and have the quality that it needs to have in it. So that's just a very obvious one. I think we deal with in product development. Even if you get more tactical, there's always this tension between how much do we need to know before we start versus starting and learning as we go, right? And, if you just start without any kind of trying to understand what you're going after, you waste a lot of time. But then if you spend all this time trying to fully understand what you're going after, you also waste a lot of time because you can't do either. So paradoxes show up very tactically. They show up more strategically and more organizationally as well.
Yeah, that's good. I like the nod to Bill right there. Build the right solution.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3. What's number 3?
So number 3 is regulate distress. And this is an interesting one because, we often view stress as being completely negative, but there's good and healthy stress. And if you, I use a sporting metaphor here, or if you are exercising or playing your favorite sport or doing something like that, there's a stress that comes at a certain level if you're doing it. But because you're enjoying it, we don't recognize it as stress. We generally recognize distress, negative stress, as being stressful. And the point here is that when you take on adaptive challenges that require changes to mental models, maybe require changes to belief systems, require people learn new ways of doing their job, maybe having to put away tried and true practices that people have developed over the years, that can lead to a lot of anxiety, can lead to a lot of nervousness, and then distress enters. So as a leader, you want to make it sure that you just foster an environment where it's not like people won't get stressed, because what you're doing is a change. So people will be stressed, but you want to regulate that and pay attention to that and be sensitive to that. And just recognize that everybody is going through this change probably at a different pace. Like, one of the things I tell leaders that I talk to is, remember that whenever you're leading a group through the kind of change we're talking about right now, it's quite likely that you've had days, weeks, and months to process it emotionally. So they're behind you. And so it surprises me that leaders expect like the people on their team to be right there with them emotionally, and forget that they've had time to like deal with the emotions And they need to allow for people to sort of catch up emotionally, if you will, as they try to embrace the new change they're about to embark on.
Yeah, I want to go deeper there because it's an interesting point. I've encountered this too, where to your point, you've been thinking about it for months, talking to other leaders and working through the change, and you have this great plan, and then you roll it out to the team, and they're seeing it for the first time. So they could be blindsided, they could be caught off guard, they could be excited for the change. How do you help foster that in a positive way to where, because really at the end of the day, it's your people that are going to execute the change, and if they're not clear and on board, it's probably not going to be successful. Any thoughts on how to make that successful pass from like idea strategy to execution?
I really love the point that you made there, that change only succeeds because the people who have to do the change actually do the change. So my first thought there is we should always be preparing the conditions for change. And what does that mean? Like, if people trust you, they know you generally have their best interest. If you follow through on what you say you're going to do, then you're creating an environment in general that is conducive to change. And I think what happens is we often make change exercises very eventful in nature, and we just don't have an environment that's like conducive to change. We haven't created organizations where people trust, they believe that what the leadership is doing is generally in the best interest. And when leaders make mistakes, they actually say, hey, I made a mistake. And so people are, for the most part, like suspicious, like, do they really have our best interests at heart? It's like people walk around thinking about that. And so when a change now shows up, people are already starting from a place of, distrust, as you said, or suspiciousness, and wondering what's going on here. So I think as a leader, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of environment am I like just fostering every single day? And then when it comes to the moment where I'm introducing a change, to recognize that people are going to respond to this differently, like you said, and I need to give time for people to kind of go through the emotions. And that will differ depending on what's going on. Like, look, if it's a change that needs to happen in the next 24 hours, because if we don't make the change, we're going to go out of business, then we're going to have to, people are going to have to get on board quickly. But if it's a change that's going to be something that's going to go on for a while and we really need people to be engaged, then we need to give people an opportunity to express themselves, remaining firm that we're going to go through this change, but also respecting that each individual is probably going to go on the change at a different pace. And also understanding like the change might not be for everybody as well. Like that's maybe swinging the pendulum too far sometimes, where we feel we need to get everybody on board. When you've done your work to create an environment that's generally trusty and all those other things, and it's time for a change, and you've given people the opportunity to express how they feel and kind of work through their emotions, then if there are people who, that change, I'm big on joy at work. If there are people who that change basically erodes all the joy at work, then you probably even, for them, want them to find something else to do too. So,
yeah, no, that's a great point. I don't know if this is like a good to great reference, but it's like the main job of a leader, pointing the bus in the right direction, getting the right people on the bus, and then getting them on the right seats. Like that's such an important piece, especially when you're changing course and doing something different. The other thing too that was interesting, you talk about like good stress, like, and just as like a side note, I feel like you need to coin a term for good stress. I feel like stress has such a negative connotation. Like there's got to be a better word, because like you mentioned the sports example, the same thing with like working out. It's painful in the time, but it has benefits over that. So we need a new word for it. That's maybe it's a tech one.
Well, there's actually a word for it. I think I might have mentioned it in the book,
Okay.
but I think it's eustress, or something like that. EUSTRESS. Generally considered as beneficial stress, but you're right on point that the fact of the matter is, how some words are ultimately defined by how they're used in society. Stress is a word that's primarily considered or primarily defined as a negative right now. So while there is a positive version of it, I think you and I both be challenged to get people to to take it and adopt it. People find it hard to think positively about stress, but there is positive stress, and like you said, working out and enjoying the workout. It's difficult, it's stressful, but it's a beneficial stress for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's go to number 4.
Maintain disciplined attention is probably straightforward. When we're asking ourselves to do things that are different, that are difficult, that challenge our way of being, it can be hard to keep focus on those things. I don't know if you've been part of initiatives where you're trying to adopt something new and it seems like people are not doing it and they're coming up with a whole bunch of reasons why they can't do it. And so this is exactly what this behavior is about. As a leader, you need to keep pointing people to the work that we have to do. And I think it's Edgar Schein that says one of the ways you transmit culture is by signaling what matters most to you when you're a leader. And, there are evolutionary explanations for this. There are other kinds of explanations for this, but we know that people look at the leaders in the organization to a large degree, and then emulate what they're doing. You may wonder why this is the case, but it is the case. And so if something's come from on high that we're going to do X, but I observe that my leader is not paying attention to it, I probably won't pay attention to it, except I'm very passionate about that thing, right? That's the exception. But when I'm not passionate about the thing, or the thing is going to introduce some stress, some negative stress into my life, I'm probably not going to be as attentive to what I need to do. And so a key point here is when we're dancing with these adaptive situations, we need to really keep people focused on the task in front of them, the adaptive work, if you mean. We need to set up the right incentives. We need to talk about it all the time. We need to let them know, help them see that this matters to us and that we want them to stay focused on it.
Yeah, and I think I draw a comparison in marketing and really in leadership, like you're talking about. It's that idea of repetition. And it's tough because, in the marketing side, we may talk about something over and over again, and just at about the point where we're just completely dead tired of talking about it, that's when it's just starting to catch on. It's the same thing in leadership too. And I think back to previous experiences, leaders would keep harping on the same thing over and over again, but that was intentional, right? Because you're kind of signaling, to your point, where the priority is, where the focus is. And it's so critical because you're trying to get a large group of people focused in the same direction.
Yeah. Like they say, repetition deepens the impression. And so that's just important. You need to keep talking about it, keep highlighting it, keep tying it back to why it matters for sure. So you repeat it, but you also tie it back to this is why this is so important at this time. And if we don't do what we're trying to do here, this is how it negatively potentially impacts all of us here. So we need to really take this on. And I just want to say, sometimes in orgs, we don't want to tell the truth, right? We take this kind of parent-child relationship. As a parent, there are things you don't think your children are mature enough to handle that are important, and you keep that information away from them. And I can totally relate to that as a parent of 3 kids. There's just information I wouldn't share with my kids at this particular point. But in the workplace, we're not dealing with children. These are mature men and women, many, making big time decisions every single day. And so if their actions can impact negatively or positively the org, I think it's important. It's healthy transparency, but I think too many orgs err on the side of trying to protect their people by not giving them important information they need to know.
Mm-hmm. No, that one hits in my core. That's a very good point there. I like that. All right, number 5.
Give the work back to the people. Hopefully this is a bit self-evident. This is really saying the adaptive work needs to be done by the people. And you hit on this, I think, when you're making the comment that, You need the people who the change needs to be done by the people ultimately. And so giving the adaptive work back to the people is making sure as a leader in this context, you don't step in and say, hey, I got to make all these changes by myself. In a sense, it's not really practical, but I don't know if you've worked for a product, micromanaging product person in the past who wants to do everything by themselves. That's just not a scalable approach. People need to have a sense of ownership. This is a part of like almost, letting people be citizens in a way, right? Just having people be active in shaping the outcomes that we all desire. And so giving the work back to the people. Another maybe important nuance here is often leaders think that it's their job to come up with the solution and then have other people implement the solution. And there's certain challenges where that might be the case, where it's a challenge with a clear technical solution and the leader might be the expert and all they need to do is tell people what to do. But these adaptive challenges, many cases, there isn't a defined solution and we need to figure it out together. And so you want your teams to really own figuring it out together and really taking ownership of the work and not becoming like order takers or just following instructions on an instruction sheet.
Yeah. Any examples in your past experience, whether that's Cox or other places, where either that you've seen that done effectively or maybe not so effectively, kind of giving the work to the people and where it either worked or didn't?
Yeah, I think product development is a great example of this because the whole thing about product development is you're trying to provide a product of some sort that helps somebody do something they want to do, right? So every product in the world is really an enabler. It helps somebody meet a need of theirs ultimately. Like the product in of itself is not what they desire ultimately. What they desire is something else, and that product, to use jobs to be done framing here, enables them to do the job they want to do. But in understanding what the right product is, there are really two kind of big schools out there. We have a school where you have some very senior product people and they make all the decisions on what the product's going to be. And then they have a team that just implements all of their decisions. And that's an example of not giving the work back to the people, because a lot of product development is adaptive work. We don't know exactly what's needed. We need to talk to people and learn and iterate over what's done. So the great examples that I've seen is leaders who connect their teams with people that have problems, give them all the support, all the resources, all the funding, and say, you own developing and delivering a solution for this customer and this situation. This is your adaptive challenge to own, team. I'm here to provide support, provide guidance, provide resources, maybe contribute where it makes sense, but this is yours to own versus I'm going to decide maybe in an ivory tower what the solution is and you're going to implement it.
Yeah, so many parallels in the product development space there. All right, let's finish it up. Number 6.
Number 6 is protect leadership voices from below. And all this is getting to is there are always those individuals in our groups who have dissenting opinions or who say things that might rub people the wrong way. Not that the thing itself is what they're saying is bad, and this is not condoning like people speaking, just not being nice. This is really about people who have unpopular opinions, making it safe for them to do so and giving them airtime as well. We talk a lot about cognitive diversity, or we talk about diversity in general, and a big type of diversity is cognitive diversity. You have people who, whenever a new idea comes up, the first thing they see is every reason why you can't implement that idea, right? And then you have people, the idea comes up and they see every reason why the idea will work. If you're in an environment that has that has a bias towards like, let's get things done. People who kind of press on the brakes and say, slow down, become unpopular. But you want to ensure as a leader that you allow these people's perspectives to come out, because in many cases, in my personal experience, having worked with, people on both sides, everyone's got something to bring to the table that should be considered, and you just don't want to overlook it. Even if it's unpopular, there's often some wisdom in what they're sharing and that you want to take into consideration. So that's an important aspect of keeping an environment, keeping a healthy environment where people are taking on challenges.
Yeah, something we've adopted at Hatchworks over the past couple of years is, the whole team does what's called like a DISC assessment. So if you're familiar with like Myers-Briggs, kind of a personality test. But what's been beneficial there is I know that, Trent on the team is this type of personality versus, Kathleen's this type of personality. It just gives better enablers for that type of conversation, because somebody may be more reserved, may need to think about something deeper before voicing an opinion, versus somebody else may be like, all right, I got perspective right away. And I think too, it's like, I think you mentioned in a previous chat, like, yeah, we're both self-proclaimed introverts, right? So it's giving those other folks the voices that may be quieter on the team, freedom to speak and voice their opinion. And I think that's been an interesting evolution for us at Hatchworks over time.
Yeah, I think one technique that I've really come to appreciate over the years, that's in the same vein of understanding people's thinking styles, whether it's DISC or HBDI or some of the other things that are out there today, is De Bono's 6 thinking hats. And I don't know if you've heard about it before, but yeah, it's De Bono. Was a great creative thinker, wrote a lot of stuff on how groups can work better and how innovation can occur. But he has this idea of 6 thinking hats, and I'll just go over them quickly because they're interesting. But what the 6 thinking hats do is, to your point, in making it safe for people to raise things, it makes it less about the person and really challenges the group to wear particular hats as they go through a problem. That way, you get an opportunity to hear all the various perspectives. So the 6 hats are white, yellow, I believe gray, red, green, and I think blue, if I'm not mistaken. And so the white hat is really, if I memory serves me right, is like, just state what the facts are. The yellow hat is all about positive, like the go-getters, people who are all about like, yeah, we can make this happen, and give up the reasons why. There's another hat that's all about, what are the risks with this? The red hat's all about emotion. How do you feel about this? The green hat focuses largely on creativity and whatnot. And then the blue hat, sort of the person who's making sure that if we're all wearing our white hats right now and stating the facts, that's what we're doing. Like, no one's wearing a green hat when we should be wearing a white hat. So that's another way of, if you think about it, protecting voices from below by sort of asking everybody to move from maybe their preferred or default thinking approach to different thinking approaches while talking about a problem.
Okay, when you brought up the colors, that rung a bell, because I do remember, I forget when it was, sometime at AT&T in a past life, we were in a room, and I remember like we moved by the colors. It was some kind of exercise that I think was tied to this methodology. So that's triggering back some memories now.
Yeah. I think it should be used more. I'm often in a lot of meetings where I think we'd benefit from using the thinking hats in this meeting, because asking people to actually adopt a different stance is actually very healthy for us. If I'm always thinking about the risks associated with things, and that's sort of my default, my go-to, that's natural for me. But maybe what I need to begin to grow is the way I think about opportunity, and kind of putting on that hat can help me develop that part of my thinking as well.
That's perfect. I think that's a great place to wrap it up there, Eb. So where can people find you find your stuff? Where's the best place for people to go?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, Ebenezer Ikonne. You can find me on there. I'm on Twitter as well, even though Twitter is, or is it X these days?
X now, yeah.
Yeah,
I think they still got some mixed
X,
branding too.
yeah, the artist formerly known as Twitter is probably what it is. So I'm still on X, as you mentioned. I have a YouTube channel called Joy at Work, where I talk about experiencing creating joy at work for yourself and with others. And yeah, and then my book, Becoming a Leader in Product Development's on Amazon or 8 Press, and you can get it from there as well.
Yeah, the book's great. I encourage everybody to check out the Joy Work too. Like nice little tidbits tied to your thinking and approach. There are lots of good stuff there.
Appreciate
Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. It's been fun.